The walls are closing in on Tehran, and Washington just put a price tag on it. Right now, as you're watching this, the US State Department's Rewards for Justice program has issued a $10 million bounty, not on a rogue militant hiding in a cave, but on Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, along with the top tier of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The latest escalation traces back to February 28th, when the United States and Israel carried out coordinated airstrikes on senior Iranian leadership targets in Tehran. Strikes that killed Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who had ruled the country since 1989, along with several people close to him. That vacuum didn't stabilize, it accelerated. On March 8th, Mojtaba Khamenei, the slain leader's son, was selected as Iran's new supreme leader, and now Washington is hunting him too. But here's what the mainstream press is barely whispering. Iran's intelligence ministry announced it had arrested 30 spies, internal mercenaries, and operational agents of Israel and the United States over just the past few days, meaning the intelligence war raging inside Iran's borders is not theoretical. It is happening. Iranian citizens are reportedly feeding information directly to Israel, acting as on-the-ground assets, while Israel claims spotters and spies have assisted in targeting Basiji and IRGC security checkpoints. The $10 million reward is effectively the price Washington is paying to overcome its own intelligence failure. It cannot reliably locate or identify Iran's surviving leadership. That is the real story. A superpower, mid-war, publicly admitting it doesn't know where the supreme leader is hiding. This is not dominance. This is the architecture of a collapsing strategy dressed up as strength. Let's go even deeper into what this moment actually means, because the bounty is only the surface layer of a much darker story unfolding right now at the intersection of empire intelligence warfare and the collapse of an old regional order. On February 28th, the United States and Israel launched a joint operation, numbering nearly 900 strikes in just the first 12 hours alone, what Washington branded Operation Epic Fury. And the timing of that first wave was not random. According to US and Israeli officials, the timing of the initial attack was tied in part to the ability to target Ali Khamenei before he would go into hiding. That is how you read that sentence. They had a window and they took it. The supreme leader of Iran, the man who ruled the Islamic Republic for 35 years, was killed in the opening salvo because someone, somewhere, gave up his pattern of movement, his location, his schedule. The entire edifice of Iranian supreme power was penetrated before a single fighter jet even crossed the border. Now, that is not a small thing. That is not what you do with satellites and signal intelligence alone. Israeli intelligence spent years hacking Tehran's traffic cameras, specifically around Khamenei's compound on Pasteur Street, to build a pattern of life for his bodyguards, and jammed local mobile phone towers moments before the strike to prevent guards from receiving warnings. Think about that for a moment. Years of preparation, years of patient, methodical, deeply embedded surveillance, and the critical word there is local collaborators. You cannot smuggle a device into a high-security compound without someone on the inside. You cannot map the bodyguard rotation schedule without a human source. This is not Hollywood fiction. This is the reality of what was required to decapitate the Iranian state in a single morning. The strikes killed not only Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who had ruled since 1989, but several people close to him, including his daughter, grandchild, daughter-in-law, and son-in-law, and also claimed the life of Ali Shamkhani, a senior Iranian security official and longtime advisor involved in Iran's defense and national security strategy. The entire inner circle gone in hours. The strikes wiped out the country's top security tier, including Khamenei's advisor and the secretary of the newly formed Supreme Defense Council. When you eliminate not just the leader, but his entire advisory structure simultaneously, you are not conducting a military strike. You are conducting a systemic decapitation engineered with extraordinary inside knowledge, which brings us directly to the arrest wave that Iran's intelligence ministry announced on March 10th. Iranian authorities said dozens of suspected spies linked to Israel were arrested across several provinces, accused of sharing locations of military sites and key infrastructure. The information about potential targets was sent through Israeli Persian-language social media accounts and verified by Israeli authorities before strikes were carried out. Read that again slowly. Ordinary Iranian citizens, not Mossad officers, not trained intelligence operatives, but ordinary people inside Iran, were photographing military installations, pinpointing IRGC checkpoints, and transmitting coordinates through social media channels directly to Israeli targeting teams. This is a distributed, crowdsourced intelligence network operating inside a police state that executes people for espionage. And it worked. The Fars news agency, affiliated with the IRGC itself, reported that the West Azerbaijan prosecutor's office had arrested 20 individuals in the northwestern city of Urmia for allegedly providing Israel with information about military, police, and security sites. Separately, Iran's Ministry of Intelligence said it had arrested a 10-member group in Mazandaran province and another 10-member network in Khorasan Razavi province, with authorities saying suspects transferred the locations of military installations and economic infrastructure and shared coordinates of public places, academic institutions, and research centers with Israel. This is not a localized breach. This is a nationwide network of ordinary Iranians feeding a real-time targeting system during an active war. The Islamic Republic is not facing an external enemy alone. It is facing the quiet revolt of its own people through the barrel of a smartphone camera. The Ministry of Intelligence, deeply alarmed, issued a statement requesting the public's help in identifying spies and urged civilians to report such cases to the ministry, effectively calling for neighbor-on-neighbor surveillance. That is the tell. When a government starts begging its own population to spy on each other, it has already lost the moral authority to govern. That is not strength. That is fear, dressed up in bureaucratic language. In wartime, the label spy is often used broadly, sometimes applied to anyone who challenges the official narrative or shares images showing damage to military sites. So when Tehran calls someone an American Zionist mercenary, what they may actually mean is a young person with a phone who filmed a burning IRGC building and sent it to a Telegram channel. The regime cannot distinguish between a Mossad asset and a grieving Iranian mother who is simply angry. And that fury has roots far deeper than this war. Back in January 2026, Iran International concluded a multi-stage investigation that, based on government sources, eyewitness accounts, field reports, and hospital data, ascertained that at least 12,000 civilians were killed during protests on January 8th and 9th, largely perpetrated by the IRGC and the Basij militia. The killings were ordered by Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei himself, with the approval of the three branches of government. 12,000 people killed in 2 days by their own government. That is the foundational context without which you cannot understand why ordinary Iranians would risk execution to share coordinates with an enemy air force. This is not treason in the conventional sense. For many of these people, it is the only weapon they have. Now let us circle back to the $10 million bounty, because there is a detail in that announcement that reveals more than Washington ever intended. 4 of the 10 Iranian leaders on the rewards for justice list are identified only by title, with no listed names, including the Secretary of the Defense Council, the advisor to the Supreme Leader, the military office chief of the Supreme Leader's office, and the IRGC commander. No names, no faces, blank silhouettes. The United States, with the most sophisticated intelligence apparatus in human history, currently conducting an active air war against Iran, does not know who holds 4 of the 10 most powerful positions inside the Iranian state. That is a confession, not a press release. Washington is literally asking the public to help it identify its own enemy. The bounty program is not a sign of dominance. It is a public admission of an intelligence gap so large you could fly a B-2 bomber through it. The Rewards for Justice program has previously offered bounties for terrorists like former al-Qaeda leaders Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri. But those were non-state actors hiding in caves and safe houses. What Washington is doing here is placing a bounty on the sitting head of state of a sovereign country, a nation of 90 million people. This is territory that rewrites the rules of international statecraft in real time, and almost no one in the mainstream American media is pausing to examine what it actually means for global order when the United States government publicly offers cash rewards for information on a sitting supreme leader. U.S. intelligence reports as of March 12th indicate that the IRGC and the interim leaders who took over after Khamenei's death continue to maintain control over the country, and that a forced regime change in Iran would likely require a ground offensive allowing the Iranian population to safely protest in the streets. That assessment matters more than any press briefing from Pete Hegseth. The American intelligence community is telling the White House internally that the strategy is not working. The bombs have not broken the regime. The IRGC still functions. The new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, while reportedly wounded, has already issued public statements. Ali Larijani posted a video of Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian walking in Tehran during the country's annual Quds Day demonstrations and taunted U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's claim that Iranian leaders were hiding underground. The very people Washington put a bounty on were publicly walking the streets of Tehran on Iran's National Day of Solidarity with Palestine. Israel has launched a new phase targeting checkpoints manned by the IRGC based on tip-offs from informants on the ground, with a source briefed on military strategy saying that informants in Tehran passed intelligence on 3 specific checkpoints struck in the past 3 days. So now the informant network is not just passive, photographing buildings and sending coordinates. It is active, real-time, and targeting the security forces that suppress Iran's own population. The Basij routinely suppresses protests inside Iran and maintains security checkpoints throughout the capital, and the Israeli campaign against these positions signals an effort to degrade internal security forces that could respond to any popular uprising. The strategic logic is becoming clearer. This is not purely a military campaign. This is a political military fusion operation designed to simultaneously destroy Iran's external military power and hollow out its internal repression apparatus, hoping that at some point the population rises. But as we noted, US intelligence itself does not believe that uprising is coming on its own. Questions remain about the whereabouts of Esmail Qani, the head of the IRGC Quds Force, with unconfirmed rumors circulating in regional media claiming that Qani allegedly left a meeting shortly before an Israeli strike that killed several senior IRGC commanders, fueling speculation he could be an infiltrator working on behalf of Iran's enemies, though he has not appeared publicly since the bombing, leaving his status entirely unclear. If that rumor has any truth to it, and it has not been confirmed, then the paranoia inside what remains of Iran's command structure must be absolutely paralytic. Every commander, every general, every intelligence chief is now looking at the man beside him and wondering, is he the one who sold us out? That kind of institutional paranoia is a weapon in itself. You do not need to kill every leader when you can make every leader suspect every other leader. Meanwhile, Russia has provided some help to Iran in this war, reportedly giving Tehran intelligence support for Iranian drone attacks against targets, including US troops in Iran's Persian Gulf neighbors, Israel, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and elsewhere. But Moscow is simultaneously trying to preserve Trump's sympathy over Ukraine and does not want to provoke renewed large-scale US military support for Kyiv by appearing to openly obstruct Washington's campaign against Tehran. Putin is playing every side simultaneously, as is his tradition. He wants Iran to bleed slowly, but not to collapse, because a collapsed Iran hands Washington a total victory in the Middle East that reorganizes Eurasian power for a generation. At the same time, he cannot afford to be seen as Iran's defender when he is still negotiating with Trump over Ukraine. Moscow is trapped in its own strategic contradiction. By March 10th, marking 10 days of Operation Epic Fury, U.S. Central Command said that more than 5,000 targets in Iran had been struck, including command and control centers, IRGC headquarters, IRGC intelligence sites, integrated air defense systems, ballistic missile sites, Iranian naval ships and submarines, anti-ship missile sites, military communications capabilities, and ballistic missile and drone manufacturing facilities. 5,000 targets in 10 days. That is not a military campaign. That is an industrial demolition project. And yet the Islamic Republic stands, wounded, paranoid, hemorrhaging informants, executing its own citizens at an accelerated pace, but standing. Iran's parliament passed an emergency bill to increase penalties for espionage and collaboration with hostile states, allowing suspects to be tried under wartime conditions, with the judiciary chief saying those arrested in the context of Israel's attacks would be prosecuted under wartime legal provisions. A government that passes emergency espionage laws mid-war and then begs neighbors to report their neighbors is a government in the grip of genuine existential terror. What you are watching in real time is the unraveling of a 47-year-old theocratic state under pressure from outside bombardment and inside betrayal simultaneously. The bounty is the symbol. The arrested spies are the symptom. But the disease, the fundamental loss of legitimacy, the 12,000 dead protesters, the young Iranians photographing military bases for foreign air forces, that disease was always there long before the first bomb fell on February 28th. Washington and Tel Aviv did not create the fracture. They simply decided to drive a wedge through it and see what breaks first.